Hello, everyone. My name is Mike with Disaster Cycle Services Training here at the American Red Cross, and I'd like to welcome you to our shelter training this morning. We have 10 o'clock Eastern, so let's get started. Couple of admin notes before we do. One is that you'll notice that this webinar is being recorded. That is so that we can post it online for anyone who is unable to attend one of the live sessions that we're offering. Another note is we are able to mute all lines, but participants do have the ability to unmute theirs. So we would ask you to please not do that in the interest of making sure that there is no background noise. Please just leave your lines muted. Finally, we do have a chat window open, and we'd like to handle all questions via that chat window. So please, at any time during the presentation today, enter your question into the chat window. You can enter it as a chat to everyone, or you can enter it as a chat to me. I'm the host, and my name is Mike again, but my screen name here is Disaster Training. We will likely hold most of the questions till the end because we hope that many of them will be answered later in the presentation. But there may be times where we pause to answer an appropriate question. Otherwise, we will try to handle all of them at the end. So with that, I'm going to pass it to our facilitator for today, Lori Gill. Lori?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lori Gill. As Mike mentioned, I am a mass care manager out of the New Jersey region. And first and foremost, I want to thank you for participating in this and offering your help and assistance to support those in need in Florida as we experience this unprecedented event. So with that said, we're going to just jump right in. And as Mike has already mentioned, you have guidance documents for you to follow along with. You should have received those. If not, please take a moment to download them right now. And Mike, if you can go to the next slide, we'll get started. So the purpose of this course is to provide you with a brief overview of Red Cross sheltering and also to familiarize you with the tools and resources we have available to help you be successful in working in a Red Cross shelter. Hurricane evacuation shelters are meant to be places of last resort. Typically, they're for individuals and families who were unable to evacuate or unable to shelter in place. So these facilities are made available for them. It really is for pre-landfall, get to that location, and it's meant to be a safe place to weather the storm. So for your awareness, there may not be the standard amenities available, such as cots, blankets, comfort kits. It really is about just having a safe place to ride out the storm. Next slide. So before we really dive in, I want to take a moment just to talk about things that you should be prepared for in these hurricane evacuation shelters. As I mentioned, life safety is the primary focus of a hurricane evacuation shelter, so your personal preparation is critical. Please bring all the supplies you need to support yourself during these operations, and that would include clothing, toiletries, any medications that you might need, maybe a comfort item or two, because it may not be safe for you to leave during the storm. So be prepared once you're in this location to ride it out for a while. So please, make sure you've got yourself prepared so you're best able to help take care of any clients that are in the shelter. Next slide. Working in the shelter is an important and very challenging job. And in these hurricane events, please be aware that anxiety tends to increase with the shelter population. And your shelter population will typically consist of some of the most vulnerable of our population. That would include elderly, those that may have functional and access needs, perhaps some homeless population. As the storm nears and passes, it's important for you as a worker to remain vigilant and prepared to handle those heightened emotions and have a good sense of self-awareness to ensure both worker and client safety. You can see on the slide some recommendations of self-care, and some of these are just, as simple as taking a breath, taking a pause, walking away for a minute. but it really is essential that you take care of yourself so you can provide the best service to the shelter clients. Keep in mind, you cannot take care of anyone else if you're not taking care of yourself. So please, really consider yourself and self-care a priority. You are the only person that knows what works best for you in your own stress management. So just take a minute every day to kind of recharge, think about what you need. Getting stressed doesn't alleviate anything. So just, make sure that you're recharged. Try to maintain your sense of humor. Do the best that you can do, but just be aware that your self-care is important. Next slide. So some of the documents that we have our best practices documented in are noted here on this graphic. We have an operating a shelter checklist as well as an operating a shelter job tool. These and other sheltering documents can be found on our sheltering toolkit on the Red Cross intranet, or you can download them. Documents are available at the nationalmasscarestrategy.org website. It's important to note that these tools apply to standard Red Cross short-term shelters. I'll be pointing out the differences in operating a hurricane evacuation shelter as we walk through the training. And we are going to go through step by step so that you're familiar with the document and where to find information. Next slide. It's important to note that everything we do in Red Cross relates to our fundamental principles and our mission statement. Our mission statement is on the slide, so please, take a second to review that. Everything we do as far as sheltering also relates to our commitment as shelter workers. Things you need to be thinking about are volunteer workforce, that we're donor funded, that this is short term, that it's life safety. So keep these things in mind. Next slide. Other guiding principles for us are our fundamental principles of the Global Red Cross Network, and they guide all of our actions, so I do want to review each of them. The Red Cross, born of a desire to bring assistance without discrimination to the wounded on the battlefield, relates to our humanity. We want to prevent and alleviate human suffering wherever it's found. Its purpose is to protect life and health and to ensure respect for the human being. Please take note of that. We really want to be respectful of our clients in these facilities as well as our co-workers. It promotes mutual understanding, friendship, cooperation, and lasting peace amongst all people. Impartiality. We make no discrimination as to nationality, race, religious beliefs, class, or political opinions. We endeavor to relieve the suffering of individuals, being guided solely by their needs, and to give priority to the most urgent cases of distress. Neutrality. In order to continue to enjoy the confidence of all, the Red Cross may not take sides in hostilities or engage at any time in controversies of a political, racial, religious, or ideological nature. Independence. Well, the Red Cross is independent. The national societies, while auxiliaries of the humanitarian services of their governments and subject to the laws of their respective countries, must always maintain their autonomy so that they may be able at all times to act in accordance with Red Cross principles. Voluntary service. This is where you definitely come in. The Red Cross is a voluntary relief movement not prompted in any manner by desire for gain. Unity. There can only be one Red Cross society in any one country. It must be open to all. It must carry on its humanitarian work throughout its territory. And universality. The Red Cross is a worldwide institution in which all societies have equal status and share equal responsibilities and duties in helping each other. So if you ever question the proper response to any situation in a shelter, let these principles that I've just reviewed with you help guide your decisions. Now let's take a look at the sheltering program principles. Next slide, Mike. When we look at sheltering in the Red Cross, we have some concepts and principles that we're committed to in our service delivery. We're committed to providing quality customer service, ensuring accessibility for all, and delivering services consistently across the country. So what does quality customer service mean? Well, let's think about it. Making the customer feel welcome and important, paying attention to the customer's needs, and being friendly to the customer. And who are our customers? Well, those are our clients that are coming into these facilities. What kind of concerns might be involved when ensuring accessibility? Our shelters do need to be open to all, so let's think about what we may encounter. There could be different languages, other forms of diversity such as culture, religion, race, ethnicity. I mentioned early disabilities and access and functional needs, homelessness, nationality. Red Cross shelters are open to everyone. We do not discriminate in any way. Shelters must also be ADA accessible. We need to provide for clients with different languages, dietary needs, cultural needs, etc. Next slide, Mike. In the Red Cross, we look at sheltering as a cycle with 6 phases. The first 2 phases, overall planning and coordination, coordinating the shelter operation, they happen as part of a coordinated effort outside of the shelter. So those are things that have already happened or are happening now. We're planning the sheltering operation, including deciding where to open those locations and how to coordinate resources between them. Our training today is going to focus on the remaining phases, which happen inside the shelter. So we'll talk about resourcing the shelter, opening the shelter, operating the shelter, and closing the shelter. The work done inside of the shelter is part of this overall plan to help people in need. Next slide. To run a successful shelter program, ensuring our shelter principles are met takes an entire team spread out between the shelters, in our districts, and in our headquarters. In the operations and district headquarters offices, there's going to be sheltering leads who are responsible for all of the shelters in this response. In each shelter, there's going to be one shelter manager whose responsibilities include the administration, management of shelter staff, assurance that needs of clients or customers are being met, assurance that safety of clients and staff is met, coordinating possibly with partner agencies, coordinating information and resources with headquarters, conducting and reporting shelter counts, and assuring staff keep accurate records. Supervisors in each shelter who report to a shelter manager provide administrative support. So they help supervise the workers, they act on behalf of the shelter manager for a particular shift, function, task, or set of functions. The number of supervisors is typically determined by the size and complexity of the shelter, and we follow a general span of control of about 5 to 7 workers per supervisor. Next slide. Shelter workers are responsible for completing the day-to-day activities within the shelter. They often perform many roles and tasks as needed, reporting to the shelter manager or supervisor. Shelter workers can include Red Cross volunteers, event-based volunteers. You may hear me refer to them as EBVs, event-based volunteers, volunteers from partner agencies like many of you. In smaller shelters, workers may perform a variety of roles such as specific to dormitory working, being a feeding worker, reception and registration, perhaps you're providing information. In a hurricane setting, in a hurricane evacuation shelter, safety is even more important, and the services that we typically provide may be more limited. Let's get into talking about the operating a shelter checklist. It's a great tool that hopefully you'll be able to print and have with you. And Mike, if you can go to the next slide, please. The operating a shelter checklist is designed to be printed double-sided and folded, so it creates like a booklet. You can fit it in a notebook in your back pocket. It's easy to carry with you. It's written with the shelter manager in mind, but provides a great overview for all levels of shelter workers, and will really help you with a sense of what's going on and what's to be expected. This checklist is actually a companion to the Operating a Shelter job tool. So if at any point you think you need more details or information about a particular task, you can look at that exact same section in the job tool. It's just that this checklist is a little more condensed and really, truly a checklist. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow through this guide throughout today's training. We're going to go page by page to help you give an understanding and where to find what you might need. Next slide, Mike. And Mike, if you can mute everybody, I'm getting some feedback. Thank you. The table of contents gives an indication of how the checklist is set up. You'll see here that the checklist is designed to follow the logical flow of a shelter operation. When we get into those actual checklists, you'll notice that the steps are not necessarily done in a specific order. They're just items to make sure that you're getting to. In some cases, you may have to prioritize, but just be aware that it's not always set up in a must do A before you can do B kind of thing. Next slide. Regardless of what phase of shelter operation you're in, you can refer to the section of the checklist that pertains to exactly the task you're trying to perform. So, for example, the shelter might already be open and operating, and then additional resources are needed. So the instructions for requesting resources are in the resourcing the shelter step. There may be times when not all tasks can be completed because of timing or resource constraints, which please be aware in these hurricane evacuation shelters may be the case. When this happens, the critical tasks should be prioritized. The rest of the steps are not skipped forever, but they need to be completed as soon as possible, but please be diligent in prioritizing, and your shelter manager can assist you with that. The legend indicates the reference to other Red Cross documents are in bold print. Referrals to other areas in this checklist are italicized, and prioritized actions are asterisked, bolded, underlined, and italicized, as you can see on the graphic. Just remember, if time and resources don't allow for all the steps, focus on the prioritized ones. So don't get hung up on what you don't have, but do be mindful of the things that are priorities. Next slide. So before we open the shelter, we have to have the people and supplies to do so. And deciding what and how much is needed comes from gathering information about the disaster and the impacted population. The shelter manager has to think about what information would be helpful in setting up the shelter, so they gather information about the facility, the disaster, and the clients. Information about completing this task can be found in the Resourcing the Shelter section. The opening of facilities as hurricane evacuation shelters is contingent on size, scope, and complexity. Some considerations would include activities, facilities, are sites that are safe from direction and intensity of the storm track. Local radio, television, social media are the standard sources for disseminating information to the public about these sites. Facilities used for hurricane evacuation, have they been evaluated against a set of criteria to ensure safety from winds, storm surge, et cetera? The Red Cross has a standards for hurricane evacuation shelters that we look at when selecting those facilities. And also that clients receive some messaging prior to evacuation to prepare them for the evacuation sheltering. The public should be advised to bring supplies from their households with them to the shelter that they think they're going to need, just as we said that you should bring resources for yourself. We ask residents to do the same. And hopefully they're also being alerted to the fact that shelter residents, you really don't have privacy. It's limited space. There may be delays in meal service due to the weather. But even in limited services settings, please pay special attention to ensuring that the shelter is accessible to all clients, including those with disabilities and others with access and functional needs. When we say access and functional needs, we're referring to individuals who may come to the shelter and need help with mobility, perhaps because they use an assistive device such as a wheelchair or walker. We're also referring to individuals who might have diminished mental capacity. They may have specific dietary needs for health reasons. It could be language barriers, or who have other issues that will need to be addressed in order to make their shelter a safe and comfortable experience for them. Once this information is gathered, we begin to determine the needs of our clients and the resources we need to meet those needs. So again, it may not be there at the start, But as workers in the shelter, it's important for you to have this awareness, take note of what those needs are, so we can start working on resourcing as soon as possible. Next slide. So now we can begin to develop and communicate our shelter plan. So the shelter manager makes an initial plan for the shelter. The manager will map out areas where services can be provided, making sure that all service delivery areas are clearly identified and fully accessible. So that would mean, you know, where is there going to be a cafeteria or place to eat? Where will the dormitory be? How will we be set up? Hurricane evacuation shelters are typically found in school structures. The standard for housing in these facilities will be within the hallways, which does not necessarily align with our sheltering standards and procedures. So this does require some outside of the box thinking as it relates to dormitory accommodations. The reason for doing this is safety, and that's where the building is most likely the most structurally sound. Access is typically limited because at this stage we're operating in pre-landfall status. This can definitely change post-landfall, and that's when we'll determine following an impact assessment and client needs for post-storm sheltering. So the location you're in may become a longer-term shelter, a post-event shelter. In that case, you know, in addition to layout, the plan will include how the shelter will communicate with their district or headquarters, what tasks and resources need to be prioritized, how gaps will be addressed, partner coordination, an emergency plan in case there's an emergency within the shelter, instructions for using specialized equipment in the shelter, such as possibly generators, some initial startup tasks for workers. Once the plan is drafted, it will be communicated to all the workers in the shelter, the facility point of contact, and leadership at the operations headquarters. What I do want you to take away from this is there are people both inside and outside of the shelter that will be supporting this facility. Next slide. So page 9 of this document, that directs the manager to 2 tools that are available to use in determining the personnel and material needs in a shelter, the shelter staffing tool and the shelter supply template. These job tools are available on the Red Cross intranet. If you don't have access to the Exchange, which is our intranet, and need these documents, you can ask your supervisor for assistance. Typically, these are going to be there and will be provided for you, but they are accessible to you. Just ask if they're not there. Next slide. Once the number and type of workers needed is determined, page 10 provides the manager with the tasks to assess the current worker resources, acquire more workers as needed, and assign tasks to current and new workers. You'll see in this section that every worker should receive an orientation and job induction. And what that means is that someone should be greeting you when you arrive, orient you to the shelter, all the different service delivery areas, give you some direction and instruction about your roles. If you don't feel like you understand what your assignment is or who you are directly reporting to, please ask. It's really important to us and to you that you have an understanding of what those expectations are. Next slide. In addition to workers, we also have material resources that are needed to assist in running the shelter. So pages 11 and 12 of that document provide information on assessing, ordering, and tracking the material needs of a shelter. An initial inventory is completed of both Red Cross resources and facility-owned supplies that might be available to us for use in the shelter. We routinely do inventories to ensure accurate accounting of these resources throughout the shelter operation. Let's talk about some important reasons, or some reasons why it's important to accurately track the resources in the shelter. So let's think about it. We need to know what we have on hand, and we need to know what we're going to need, balance the two so we know what to ask for. We need to be able to return that facility and the supplies in good condition. It helps us cost the track of the operation, helps us be good stewards of the donor dollar. As most of you probably know, Red Cross is donor funded, so that is very important to us. We want to have a good idea of how the shelter is running. We want to be able to tell the public and our partners what we're doing to help the people in need. And we are in daily communications with our local, state, and federal partners to keep them apprised of everything that's going on, how the population is, the counts of the populations that we have, so we can understand what resources may be needed or, what our additional asks might be. So this reporting is really important. So let's jump into setting up the shelter. Next slide. In setting up the shelter manager will have identified spaces to be used for different areas of the shelter. And please keep in mind, you may be walking in just as we're setting up. So feel free to offer a hand, ask the shelter manager, how can I help? What can I do? What needs to be done? Each area will need to be set up and ready to receive clients. As this is happening, we're going to need to post signage throughout the shelter so that people coming in know where to go and can help themselves get around that location a little better. The areas listed on this side are the standard client areas of a shelter. Many of them are not going to be established while we're in this hurricane evacuation shelter mode. Every area set up for service in the shelter does need to be accessible to every client. There are other areas that are for workers only, so that could include administration areas, area for receiving and storing food and supplies, maybe potentially an area for preparing food, and there should be an area for staff to, take a break. Sometimes you need to walk away, decompress, do some of those self-care things that we talked about before. Shelters that are open longer, additional areas may be set up when room allows. Those would include maybe a children's play area, an entertainment area, quiet area, co-located pet shelters. Again, not all of these will be set up in the beginning. It's really about getting out of harm's way in the beginning. So it may feel chaotic, but there are systems in place and there is a process. So just keep that in mind that it may feel a little rocky in the beginning, and that's normal. Normal because emotions are high. It's because we may not be able to have all of the typical resources that we would have, but have that awareness that it does smooth, it does get better, and that once the storm passes, we can start looking at additional resources. When posting signs in a shelter, please be mindful of potential language differences. Make sure that you have directional signs like arrows of which way to go, any schedules such as potential meal times or a shelter briefing, providing information to that specific shelter, related to what is happening, current events. That's going to be, you're going to hear that a lot from the population in the shelter. They're going to want as much information as possible. If you don't have it, it's okay to say that you haven't been updated yet. So, if you get information that's not fully vetted, please don't share that information until you know it to be truthful and factful. These people are being displaced from their homes, and that's a scary situation to be in. So just be mindful that it is important to share information, but that information needs to be accurate. All right, so let's get into opening the shelter. Next slide. So page 15 of this document begins the next step. In this step, the shelter is officially opened. Clients and visitors are welcomed into the shelter. Services are initiated. In addition to physically opening the shelter entrance, outside of your work, the shelter will be opened in our database, which is the National Shelter System. You may hear it referred to as NSS, and that is where we record the population counts, and we have some information on the facility itself. I do want to note that the shelter might open and start accepting clients even if you're not resourced yet. It's about getting people into a safe location. So please don't feel like if you don't have all your signs up, people can't come in. They can. So please be inviting and accommodating. Page 16 covers the very important concept of welcoming these clients and visitors. And please make sure to always have that attitude of customer service. It sets the tone. It helps put people at ease, makes them feel welcome. Remember, they're If they're there, they're not in a good place outside of there. So just be mindful that their stress levels and concerns are going to be very high, and please, be accommodating as possible. Next slide. Make sure we greet these clients warmly, identify client needs during the reception and registration processes. There are 2 observations and 2 questions to help assess and prioritize immediate needs. These questions and observations are located at the top of the dormitory registration form. There's also some rapid needs recognition cards. I don't know that they're going to be out in your shelters, but essentially what you are assessing is, or the observations you're making is, does the client or family appear to be in need of immediate medical attention, or are they overly agitated? You may need to get assistance if that's the case. The other observation is, does that client have a service animal, use an assistive device such as a wheelchair or walker? Do they demonstrate any other circumstances where it looks like they might need help in the shelter? Again, those are observations that you make to help determine what the needs of those clients are going to be. There are 2 questions also on that registration form. One of them is there anything that you or a member of your family needs right away to be healthy? And if not, is there anything you think you'll need in the next 6 to 8 hours? The second question is, do you or your family members have any health, mental health, disability, or other conditions about which you are concerned? So those are some observations and questions to be aware of as people are coming in and you're greeting them. After a client's needs are assessed and prioritized, they're provided a shelter welcome handout and are oriented to the shelter. Again, I want to address that because of the nature of these hurricane evacuation shelters, these handouts may not be available in the beginning. It really is information about expectations in the shelter, some of our rules, some of the services that are available. And again, because it is a hurricane evacuation shelter, it will be limited. So if they're not there, nothing, nothing for you to worry about. We can still orient the clients to the shelter, where they need to be, how to get through the registration process, and those things. It is important, though, to meet their immediate needs. So even if that pauses the registration process, something like a critical health or mental health related concern, that takes priority over actually filling out registration paperwork. Again, in hurricane events, as the storm is getting closer, concerns within the community increase. That can definitely produce some long lines and heightened anxiety as people are trying to get in, and this may increase the need to be kind and provide that good customer service. As mentioned earlier, local officials will make public announcements to prepare communities. I believe that is happening now in Florida, that they're letting people know where they can go. For safety reasons, typically registration in the shelters closes with the onset of tropical storm force winds. Once we're directed to halt registration activities, the hurricane evacuation shelter braces for the oncoming storm. And during this time, shelter staff is expected to remain at the shelter for the duration of the storm, pending an all clear. So again, this goes back to making sure you have everything you need. It will not be safe for you to travel. So please make sure you have everything you need, upon your arrival at these locations. Once clients are in the shelter, as workers, you're going to continually assess and reassess to provide services for clients' immediate needs through conversations and observations. And a lot of times it's just hearing people's stories and letting them talk and kind of acclimate to their temporary surroundings. Next slide. Page 17 focuses on setting up the dormitory and welcoming clients who will be sleeping in the shelter. Shelter workers lay out the dormitory, providing space for all clients, including those with disabilities and others with access and functional needs. Shelter workers may assign cots based on the needs of each client. Some may need to be closer to the restrooms, for example. Some may need special cots. In a standard shelter, each client would receive a cot, blanket, and a hygiene kit. In a hurricane evacuation shelter, cots and hygiene kits are not provided for every client, but are available for individuals who have disability or access and functional needs that may require those items. Just for your awareness, some cots are taller or they may have rails. These cots are for clients who may be heavier, have mobility issues, or need to have a portion of their body raised as they sleep. Some clients will need to be near electrical outlets if they have assistive medical devices that require power, such as maybe oxygen concentrators or CPAP machines. Clients with service animals may be more comfortable away from main traffic flow areas. That's something else for you to keep in mind. In a standard shelters, workers would map out the dormitory with cot numbers and client names. I would defer to your shelter manager on how that's going to be handled, and typically it's going to depend on the size and population and demographics of the residents within your shelter. So if that's not something that started right away, it is something that can be worked out within the confines of your shelter. Again, keep in mind these hurricane evacuation shelters, the priority is life safety, so it's really just getting people in. The other things we can work out as we go. Next page, the focus of page 18 is feeding in the shelter. Shelter clients receive all meals in the shelter. Dietary needs should be considered. Again, keep in mind the current circumstances of what may be available as the storm is approaching and ongoing. Most meals are delivered to the shelter rather than prepared on site. In hurricane evacuation shelters, these meals may not be delivered due to extreme weather conditions. So shelf-stable meals are typically stocked at the shelter along with water so that there is something on site. Shelter workers serve meals following safe food handling guidelines. Meals are generally served cafeteria style, which means, the line. In addition to meals, a snack area should be set up, stocked, and available to clients 24/7. All meals and snacks must be counted, and the count is given to the shelter manager, who's going to relay that information to their sheltering lead, and we'll get into how that's done in just a few minutes. When planning and requesting meals, think about diabetic meals, religious and dietary restrictions, soft meals, children and toddlers, ethnic, cultural, maybe even regional preferences may be considerations. Next slide. Page 19 concerns the sharing of information with clients and staff in the shelter. For clients, every shelter should have an information area set up where information is posted for clients. Ensure all information is validated before it is posted or shared. The shelter manager should conduct shelter client meetings to hear clients' concerns and keep them informed about services being provided. For the staff, the shelter should write in the shelter log and read it at the start of every shift to keep current on what is happening in the shelter. So there is a log that should be kept at the reception area or close by to make notes of things that are going on and whatnot. And what we're saying is check that as you're coming onto your shift and see if there's any open items or things that you're waiting to get information on, you're waiting for a service on. Always be aware of what's happening in the shelter location. This log is not for client use. This is for the manager and the staff so that they can stay on top of things, things to be discussed at shift change meetings, just to know any plans, needs, things that are going on. Information might need to be shared in the shelter includes information about the current disaster, the emergency evacuation plan, times caseworkers might be coming to the shelter, times of children's activities, partner organizations offering assistance, shelter concerns. Again, these are all things that might come up that information may need to be provided about. Next page. Page 20 focuses on providing disaster health, mental health, and spiritual care services. These services require. Hey, Mike, can you just check in with me? I see a note that somebody lost audio.
Yep, Lori, we're all set. That was
Okay.
resolved.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just noticed it and didn't know how long I was talking to myself. Thanks all. So on page 20 of the document, focuses on providing disaster health, mental health, and spiritual care services. These services require special qualifications and licensures, so it's not open for just, for anyone just to be able to volunteer in those areas. We do have people that are trained and meet our protocols to be able to provide this assistance, and we do have partners that we work with. But every worker should be able to assist the clients in at least identifying needs and making those proper referrals. Again, we go back to our logs for recording these referrals and just keeping track of these things and making sure that we provide the follow-up as we go. So these specialized workers may not be available at every hurricane evacuation shelter. Hopefully we'll be able to have them available by phone to provide support and guidance. And once the storm passes, hopefully we'll be able to resource the shelters with these workers specifically, but they will be available by phone. Next slide. Once the shelter's open and services are being initiated, Part 3 covers operating the shelter. At this stage, workers continue to assess client needs and provide services. Regular meetings help address any evolving needs. And now we're operational. So now we're just going to keep going and providing those direct services, have our meetings, make sure we're passing along the information. Next slide. Page 23 addresses offers from the community. Now, in a time of disaster, people want to help, and some people will come to the shelter with offers of assistance. It's important that you know that we never accept donations of money in the shelter. So what we can do is provide that donor with options for their financial donation. That can include providing donation envelopes that are pre-addressed so that they can mail them. We can refer them to redcross.org to make a donation online. We have activated the text donation, so we can refer to that. If someone wants to make a donation using their cell phone, they can text. If community members bring unsolicited material donations, we want to welcome that donor warmly, and we want to be able to escort them to someone who's assigned to help accept those donated items. The person receiving the donations will follow the procedures in our unsolicited donations management doctrine, explain what can and cannot be accepted, and how the donation will be managed on a specific operation. Please be gracious and thankful of all persons that are offering to make a donation, whether we can accept that donation or not. Now, typically, we're not able to accept donations in the hurricane evacuation shelter due to the extreme weather conditions and the design of the shelter. With a lot of people secured in a small, safe location inside the facility, it's really hard to manage other donations. I would expect that to come a little bit later, but don't be surprised if people do make those offers, as we do have a very generous population that wants to be able to help all of our residents. So let's talk about how we can manage some of these offers of help on the next slide. Some people will come to the shelter or to a Red Cross office wanting to volunteer to help those in their community affected by disaster. We call these workers event-based volunteers, or EBVs, and there are many things that they can do to help during a disaster response. What we don't do is accept them immediately into a shelter location. We need to get them in process through our staff services. This is typically done at our headquarters. That's where we'll do an electronic background check, some just-in-time training, and then we may send them to the shelter or other activities where needed. So event-based volunteers may be used to fill staff requests at the shelter. Keep in mind that these volunteers should be treated with all due respect to our partners. They should be paired with more experienced or trained staff as much as possible, and understanding that, circumstances, trained staff might be that you've been there longer. Just keep that in mind, that we do want to pair up. We do want to engage people that want to help, The event-based volunteers are likely given that abbreviated training before working in a shelter. So any offer of assistance you can provide them with would be great. They do bring needed skills. They can be slotted into positions in the shelter to help meet the needs, using their talents and abilities. Next slide. Page 25 provides steps for maintaining the staffing schedules, conducting staff meetings, and supervising workers. So part of your shelter manager's job is making sure that all staff are providing quality service for our clients and tracking resources. They ensure that the staff feel valued and have a positive experience in the shelter. Team building is also part of a manager's job. Having been in quite a few shelters myself, you do become a little family. And just like in your biological family, a lot of time together can sometimes create tensions. Just keep in mind the circumstances we're all in. Remember the self-care. Remember to be kind with each other, that it's stressful for all of us. But as you start to work together, you'll begin to recognize the strengths and weaknesses in your teammates and your coworkers. So just help fill those gaps and help understand if you recognize that someone needs a break. Help them get that break, and recognize if they've got it, they've got it. And, there are plenty of times. Next slide, please. Page 26 provides steps on operating and maintaining the facility. Now, this includes managing the facility by mainstreaming communication with the facility representative, inventorying and securing supplies and equipment that belong to the facilities, conducting a facility inspection every shift using the shift inspection form. So typically we'll do this inspection prior to opening, but we want to walk through with each shift just to make sure that things are still in good condition, that our means of egress are still, still open, that we haven't stocked supplies and limited our hallways or anything like that. So we want to keep the shelter safe and secure by limiting entry and exit to one entrance, limiting access to storage and kitchen areas, routine inventory of supplies, and ordering resources in a timely manner. Every shelter worker should be watchful for cleanliness and safety concerns. So the shelter, we're all responsible for all of it. So if the trash is overflowing, please help, address that concern. If things need to be picked up, please address that concern. If someone needs, if there's a resident that needs to talk, please listen. Take some time with them. We want you to mingle with the clients and residents of the shelters. Sit down and eat with them. Sit down and talk with them. Obviously you're going to be more comfortable with the people that are on your team, that you work with daily. But I think you're going to find a lot of satisfaction in actually spending some time with the clients and talking to them and hearing their story and getting to know them. There are amazing people on this planet that have great stories to tell. So just keep that in mind. So let's talk a little bit more about communication and reporting structures on the next slide. We do have to do a lot of data collection and reporting within the shelters in order to help support service delivery decisions. The primary report is called the Daily Shelter Report, and this includes information about the number of registrations, the number of new registrations, the dormitory population, how many workers are there, the number of meals and snacks that have been served, the number of material resources used and what's needed in the shelter. The exact time and what material resources are tracked can vary, so if you're tasked with collecting data, make sure your supervisor tells you exactly what needs to be tracked, what time it's due, and to whom. But I would say your best bet is to just go through that daily shelter report and gather as much information as requested on that form. It's a one-page, one-side form, so it's pretty easy to work with. There are other reports that are made as needed, such as logging and reporting donations, information disclosure, unaccompanied minors, and some other unusual situations. If you're in a position that requires you to complete any of these forms, you'll be trained on the job. All of our forms also include line-by-line instructions and a quick sheet with like bubble-style instructions that'll tell you, what information needs to be placed where. We also have a remote support team that's called FROST, and it's the Field Remote Operations Support Team. They focus on collecting the shelter population counts, and they're the ones that actually enter them into the National Shelter System database, that NSS I spoke of earlier. We definitely will always do a midnight count, and midnight is fluid because we can do it, as early as 10 p.m. That required overnight count is due by midnight, so the counts are a little bit earlier. They're usually taken between 10 and 11. They include all the clients that are present and receiving services in the shelter at the time of the count, as well as registered clients who will be coming back to sleep, like to stay there. So not while it's in its evacuation phase, but once it shifts to a post-impact shelter, you may have people that work an overnight shift or something. So we want to count those people as well. And this count is reported out by client age groups, and you'll actually see that on that daily shelter report. The population count is usually difficult to get in the hurricane evacuation shelters, especially breaking it out by age groups, just because it's dynamic, fast-paced, and again, it's about that life safety. So the sheltering lead will provide instructions for reporting for each specific operation. Next slide. Whether or not you're tasked with a specific role in reporting, it is important to understand what information needs to be captured, how and when that information needs to be reported, and to whom. So using the checklist will help you in this respect. Next slide. So look at that. We're already talking about closing the shelter. On page 29, before the shelters close, we verify that all the clients' housing needs have been met. This may be because the storm has passed and people are able to return to their homes, or because they received assistance that allows them to move to a different, more permanent housing. The formal decision to close the shelter happens outside of the shelter. So that's not a decision that you guys will be making within the shelter. It's part of that whole team between the shelter manager, the district, and the headquarters. So the shelter manager does coordinate, with the headquarters, who are also coordinating with our government and community partners to make a decision on whether or not to close that facility. Some considerations for whether or not to begin closing include how many clients are left, what their needs are, the status of the situation. It could be the ongoing availability of the facility. It could be, when we see, after the storm passes, what our challenges might be. But once that decision is made to close, all the partners and activity leads will be made aware of the need of the shelter closing plan. And we do make notifications both in writing and verbally to our shelter residents. We typically post those closure signs 24 to 48 hours before we close. And again, the Red Cross provides resource information to clients as they depart. I don't expect this to happen anytime soon, but just be aware, that there are these processes to close the shelter. We also complete the final inventories. We coordinate with the logistics activity to support removal of supplies and equipment, clean the shelter, and while all this is happening, the snack table stays up and stocked until the very last client leaves. So we always want to have that canteen area available to our clients. Next slide. We want our partners to come back to us if we should need to use their facility again in the future. And so to that end, we want to make sure we clean the facility well and replace any facility-owned resources we've used in the running of the shelter. We want to make sure our final inventory is completed and that workers coordinate with logistics on procedures for returning those supplies. Logistics and the shelter manager are responsible for completing the closing during a final walkthrough with the facility representative. This is likely not something that you'll be involved with, but you should certainly have an awareness of this. Next slide. Page 32 covers transferring or releasing staff. So staff who are no longer needed on the operation will out-process through our staff services. All staff members who have worked for a minimum of 7 days receive a performance evaluation from their direct supervisor. Staff working between 3 to 6 days should be given an evaluation upon request. If you're responsible for providing an evaluation to another worker, ask your supervisor for the DRO, Disaster Relief Operation, Work Performance Evaluation Form. Staff who are still needed on the operation and may still have time on their deployment should be reassigned to another shelter or activity based on the operational needs. Next slide. Finally, we close the shelter. We mark the shelter as closed in the National Shelter System. We release or transfer all staff after thanking them and providing those evaluations. We leave our contact information on the door in case somebody comes after we close so they know how to reach us. And we return the facility to the facility representative, again, with many signs. All of this documentation is turned over to our operation headquarters, where that information is processed using the same forms that we did to open it. Based on the facility use agreement, the Red Cross may repair any damages caused by our use of the facility. The facility representative signs off at the end of the closing walkthrough, agreeing to any damages or lack thereof. Next slide. If you open the Operating a Shelter job tool and look at the table of contents, you'll notice that the first part is identical to the content of the checklist, and this is by design. If you have questions about a task in the checklist or need more details, come to the same location in the job tool. Next slide. At the bottom of page 3 of the table of contents, below the closing and shelter steps, you'll see additional sections that are not included in the checklist. Each of these sections gives detailed tactical instructions on how to deliver those services. Core services are those that are provided every time in every shelter, regardless of size or duration. Some of the core services, such as disaster mental health, disaster spiritual care, are provided remotely during those hurricane evacuation shelters, as we mentioned earlier. Situational services are those services that are provided as needed. Near the bottom of page 4, you'll see an item that's called Respond to Issues and Concerns. This section of the job tool provides steps on how to address some of the more common situations that arise in some shelters. It begins with some basic guidance on resolving conflicts and problem solving, and then has a section for each issue. Next slide. At the end of the table of contents, you'll see that there is a section on sheltering forms. This section is where all of our forms are listed, including a brief description of the form, whether it is optional or required, and what happens to it at the close of the shelter. Forms can also be found on the Sheltering Toolkit on the Red Cross intranet, also referred to as the Exchange. If you don't have access to the documents, ask your supervisor for these forms. Next slide. Icons are used throughout the job tool to make it easier to find activities you may be looking for and to identify who is responsible for the tasks involved in those activities. For example, if you're assigned to feeding, you'll pay special attention to areas where the fork, knife, and spoon icon are located. The vest indicates tasks and responsibilities of a worker, while the manager icon indicates tasks for the manager and supervisors. Next slide. Pages 69 through 85 provide specific issues that may arise in the shelter and suggest steps to take in managing these issues. This section gives some basic pointers on resolving conflicts and solving problems, then covers issue resolutions beginning on page 70. So please, if you get a chance, take a look at this before you actually report to your assignment so you have some awareness of issues that can arise and the best way to resolve them. Next slide. Another tool you'll find helpful is the handout on great customer service. GREAT is actually an acronym, although we really want to provide great customer service. The guidelines in this handout reflect our core values and remind us to greet people, respect everyone's differences, evaluate and clarify expectations, address needs, thank people. In addition to the flyer, the handout includes some more detailed information on each of these great reminders. Next slide. Before you get started, you want to know about some hot topics in sheltering. These are covered in the Focal Points for Sheltering Leaders and Management document, which is customized for each disaster operation. This includes the following reminders: getting to yes. We want to find a way to help people solve their problem with positivity. Please remember, everyone is welcome. We want to ensure the facility and all of the services are accessible to all clients, including individuals with disabilities or access and functional needs. Please know that service animals are always welcome, and you can find other hot topics and links to additional resources on the Red Cross intranet, The Exchange. Next slide. You are not alone in this situation, and these tools are not your only resources. You should know who your supervisors are and reach out to them with any questions or uncertainties. Remember, I said earlier, please make sure you find out who you report to and what the expectations of you and your work assignment are. And you should also ask who to reach out to if your direct supervisor is not available, and who or what would be your next line of support. There are some email addresses here. Please take note of them so that you're able to reach out should you need additional assistance. So, Mike, what I'd like to do is, thank everybody first and foremost, but open it up to any questions you've received in the chat.
Thank you so much, Lori. Yeah, so we do have a couple of questions in the chat right now that we'll take. And while we're doing those, please, anyone else who may have a question, please use the time now to type it into the chat window. So, Lori, the first question is, can a volunteer bring their family with them to the shelter?
So, interesting question. I would say, based on circumstances, check with the staff services that will be assigning you your shifts to make sure that space is adequate. But we do need your help and support, and we want to get to yes. And so if that aids in your being able to assist, support your communities, I would check and make sure that we can do that. But everyone is welcome in a shelter. So I would just check and make sure, and I can certainly understand everyone's concern wanting to have their family close by with them.
Thank you. So the next question is, how can we receive proof of having completed this training? Proof is required to claim disaster leave.
Okay.
I think I might be able to answer this one. Or
yeah, I was going to defer to you anyway.
I should say we can't quite answer this one. Some of the folks that manage our sheltering program, I know, are working with the state employees group to kind of figure out the answer to that. So I don't have an answer to give you right now, but we are working on addressing that.
So, Mike, at the very least, are you able to get for those who have signed in, do you have their names that we can make sure that they're accounted for?
Yeah, we do have that right now, at least.
And I would suggest anybody who called in but wasn't on the actual webinar, is there a way, can they type in somehow or get their name to you that they're on? I'm
not sure. If they're not on the webinar, then the short answer is no. But we will work on figuring out a solution for how we mark credit for the training. Okay, the next question is, where can the sheltering tools and information be found?
So the tools and sheltering information are on the Red Cross intranet, which is the Exchange. If you are not a registered Red Cross volunteer, it will likely be difficult, if not impossible, for you to get to that site. So, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought some of these tools were pushed out via email as attachments.
Yeah, so everyone on here, the Florida state workers at least, should have received an email that contained this PowerPoint as well as a zip file with those tools. If you did not, I would contact I think it went through the HR network. So I would contact your HR person to see if you can get access to that email with the tools. Next question is, are strange pets admitted as service animals, such as reptiles?
So the ADA recognizes two types of service animals: dogs and miniature horses. However, a lot of people will likely come with what may be considered comfort animals. So they are not service animals, and by definition aren't required to be permitted into the dormitory. Hopefully, we'll be setting up some co-located pet sheltering, and that can alleviate some of those concerns. We do need to be flexible because of the nature of this event. And so if that is going to help keep peace and calmness, we need to be flexible and see how we can manage that. Your shelter manager will be a great resource, and maybe a separate hallway can be set up for those pets and their owners. So if the client wants to stay with their pet and their pet is not a service animal, they may not be allowed in the dormitory, but they can, hopefully we can make arrangements for them to stay with their pet in a co-located area. Different locations are likely to have different accommodations set up. There may be different partners available, such as CART, community animal response teams, that have trailers that are temperature controlled and have, the pet crates in them. So there will be different circumstances. I would defer to your shelter manager, who will get information from the sheltering lead at headquarters. I myself, not knowing each location and what its setup is going to be, cannot give you a generic answer. But again, our goal is to get to yes and to take care of the population. So we're going to do what we can. But again, we do have to be mindful of, in the dormitory, people that potentially have allergies or whatnot. And, flexibility is definitely a key word in these circumstances. So although I can't give you that hard and fast answer, there are definitely, lines of communication for you to try and work that out on what's going to be allowable in your location.
Okay, next question. When are shift assignments given?
So those will be given through staff services. I don't have the timeline for that, but I'm going to assume that it is coming up in the next day that you will be given your assignment. Again, I would anticipate staying in the shelter. So even if you're not on that shift per se, you may be just getting some downtime in a staff area because circumstances may be that it's not safe to travel. So the shift assignments, again, will come through staff services. So you know where and when to report. Just be prepared to stay there because as the storm hits, it's not going to be safe to move.
Okay, next question. I am from St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, which was just devastated by Hurricane Irma. Are there volunteer opportunities there?
Mike, can I defer to you on that one? You may know more about whether or not we're sending.
Yes. So the short answer is that we do have a response on the U.S. Virgin Islands. So there are volunteer opportunities there. However, we generally do not move event-based volunteers like yourselves via air travel to a response like that. So the people that will be assisting with the Virgin Island response are ones who are already there, local community members and the like who are already on the island, and then some of our already registered volunteers who we might send there for a specific purpose. Okay, next question. Will we typically be assigned a shelter near our residential area or out of the area? How would we get there, and how would costs incurred be covered?
So I believe the plan is to have everyone assigned as close to where they live as possible. Again, I don't have a line of sight on exactly where those shelter locations are, but I do believe that the plan is for you to be assigned as close as to your home as possible. As far as transportation and costs, I'm also not certain of that. I don't know if they'll be doing any kind of mass transportation into these locations. I know I actually just returned from Texas, and they did do some of that there where, you know, they took vans and were able to, you know, kind of courier people to the locations from a main hub. So that's going to depend on what the circumstances are there. I know we also, and hopefully you guys don't experience this, but we actually did move some people via helicopter to get them to their work assignments, in which case there are no costs to you at all, if that is the case. But yeah, we definitely have done some outside of the box thinking to make sure that we provide service delivery to as many residents as possible. And obviously that's best done in these hubs where most people are. So as far, again, as those arrangements of transportation, I think it's going to be dependent on how accessible they are as the storm approaches, or more specifically, once the storm passes, in which case your staff services person will let you know if there's a meeting place for group transportation.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question about pets that I think was already answered. A question about assignment location, which you just answered. Okay, next one. When or how soon will we be assigned to a shelter?
So I believe following this call, information will be provided to staff services. And I would say within the next 12 to 24 hours, you should definitely have an assignment and a reporting time and location. But that's, that'll be done through staff services, not through myself or Mike. Okay.
Follow-up question on the service animals. Don't they have certification paperwork if it's a service animal?
They may not. They may not. And we don't need to see it. So there are two questions, and I don't know the exact wording offhand, but typically the two questions you are allowed to ask are, has this animal been trained to provide a service for you? And what services has the animal been trained to provide? And that's it. That's all we can ask. We're going to take at face value what our clients say. And really, we just need to know the answers to those so we know what additional services, if any, we need to have to help support them. So we really do, we just have to take it at face value and do our best to meet the needs of our clients. And I know it's difficult to leave pets. We've seen that over and over in different disasters. Sometimes people will not leave because of that. We need people to get out of certain areas. And so we just need to get to yes and be accommodating as possible.
Okay. Next question. I received an email yesterday asking if I could volunteer for 7 days. I responded about 2 hours later, and it said my response has expired. Will there be a new email or phone call request sent out?
I would assume that there would be. I'm not certain on that, but we can send that back to staff services. Not sure why it would have expired. And again, I'm not doing this, Mike and I are not doing the staffing part. Mike, do you know, can we direct that to someone specific with staff services? Does that go?
Yeah, we can send that. We can send that question up and confirm. I think you're right that there will be another request coming out.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be plenty of more.
Okay, next question. Can I volunteer after the storm?
Yes, absolutely yes.
Okay, next question. We may have partially answered it. Once we have finished this training, will we receive certificates? I completed this course yesterday, but still continue getting emails to complete the training. So I'll answer this one, or at least I'll add to my previous answer. We're still working out the method for how you will receive credit for this. We intentionally did not require pre-registration for these WebEx trainings because of the numbers of folks that we were getting. However, I can tell you that we will not have certificates for completion of this training. There may be future trainings that you take that are through our online learning management system, in which case you automatically receive a certificate when you complete those trainings. So stay tuned for more information on that. But for this particular webinar, there is no certificate, and we are figuring out how we will make sure that you get credit. Okay, next question. I think was answered. Well, let me read it because I think it's kind of a two-part question. Do we have to stay at the shelter? And then I was hoping to volunteer after the storm to those in need. So I think we already answered that, volunteering after the storm. So do we have to stay at the shelter?
So if you are doing multiple shifts, you don't necessarily have to stay, but I do want to reiterate that while the storm is passing, it's not safe to travel. And so please be prepared to stay at the shelter for your own safety. If the storm is still going on, if roads are not clear, your shelter manager will be advised when people can move again. But we do have criteria that at certain wind speeds, we do not move. Everybody must stay exactly where they are. And this is for everyone's safety and accountability. So, just please be prepared to be there. Once the storm passes, if you're doing multiple shifts, of course, you can go home on your downtime and then just report back. But if it's not safe to travel, be prepared to stay in the shelter.
Okay, next question. Do we need to bring bedding, sleeping bag, sheets, other items like that?
First, review.
I suggest that you do. Because, again, these are hurricane evacuation shelters. You're not going to have a lot of amenities at first. You may not even have cots right away. So anything that's going to make you more comfortable, I would suggest bringing, but keep in mind of space limitations, so please do not show up with a U-Haul with your belongings. But, yeah, absolutely, if you have, if there's a pillow you use that helps you sleep, please bring that. If there's, a sleeping bag is going to make you more comfortable, please. Yeah, please, make sure that's part of your self-care and what you're going to need to take care of yourself. So absolutely, you're certainly welcome to bring some items for yourself, for your own comfort. Mike, before we go on to the next question, while we still have everyone, I do want to add a couple of thoughts. I just want to remind people that it's going to feel chaotic. It is going to be chaotic. It's an organized chaos. It will be bumpy at first. It will be unsettling. I promise you it will be rewarding once you get through it. Just know that up front that, what you're doing is incredible. Helping your own community, it's fabulous. It's great that you're going to be, supporting your own state. We as Red Cross are so grateful for your support in these operations. I just want you to be aware that it's going to feel bumpy at first, and it should. So if you're feeling off kilter, that's perfectly normal. because we're all going through this. And we're going through it, trying to support others who are going through it. So just know that up front, and just be kind to each other, be kind to the residents in the shelter. You know, resources will come. Again, you have these 2 emails you can reach out to, the masscare@redcross.org, sheltering@redcross.org. When you get to the site and you have your supervisor, ask them, you know, if I can't get hold of you, who's next in the chain of command to help. But please try to resolve any concerns or issues at the lowest possible level, because there are multiple shelters and multiple operations happening. And so if anything can be resolved at the lowest level, that's going to help the operation overall. And I say this just so, you know, for you to be aware, you know, just it's hard, especially your first shift. It's something new. And, you know, just, you know, talk to the residents, be kind, and, you know that you do have resources and you do have people to reach out to. And Mike, I just wanted to get that out before we got to next questions. I know we only have a few minutes remaining, so if there are more questions, I'm happy to continue. Yeah,
thank you, Lori. Just a couple of more. First, do we need to bring ID?
You should. And Mike, I don't know what the plan is on the ground for identification for the staff. But typically you should have something that has your name on it. Even if it's, you know, at the very least, when you're out on your assignment, you want to have some kind of name badge. I would not bring a lot of, I typically stick my driver's license in my pocket and maybe $20 cash. I don't carry a purse. You know, I don't carry a lot of stuff with me. It just bogs me down. But yeah, some kind of ID, absolutely. And you should also be getting some form of public-facing ID as you're working in the shelter, so the residents know that you're part of the staff there. So whether it's, you know, a vest, a hat, a T-shirt, a lanyard, hopefully you'll get some kind of identifying paraphernalia so that, again, the clients can recognize you. But yes, some form of ID is helpful.
Okay, if we want to volunteer after the storm, how will they know to assign me after the storm?
So you can talk with staff services and just let them know, hey, I'm available to continue supporting, and this is when I'm available. How can you use me? So you just, if no one's reaching out to you, please advocate for yourself. Keep in mind there are thousands of workers. So, you know, just let us know and remind us, hey, I'm still here and I'm still able to support, and I would like to, you know, work in the shelter at this time if possible.
Okay, so I think just 2 more questions, and I think they're both for me. First one is, I missed the first 20 minutes of this training. Do I need to register again to be certified? So like I mentioned, we don't currently have a certification process for actually proving that you've completed this training. So stay tuned if that changes, and we'll work with your administrators to figure out how to resolve that. For our purposes, if you miss the first 20 minutes of this training, you know, what we really want is to pass the knowledge on to you folks who are going to be going to a shelter. So if you miss the first 20 minutes, I would encourage you to, yes, take another one of the sessions, or at least take the first 20 minutes of another one of these sessions, or alternately to view the first 20 minutes of one of the recorded versions that we'll be posting soon, and that location should be sent out to you. So again, it's important that you get the information. Actually getting certified or getting credit for the course is secondary. One I know that may have importance, and we're working on that. Okay, so hold on a moment. So next question, the form that was sent out to fill out is requesting a SABA ID and an Embark ID to be able to submit. Where do we get that? So first of all, those are the same thing. SABA and Embark are the former and the current name of our learning management system. So, and that is the system that I referred to a few minutes earlier, where we have additional training, web-based and self-study training that you'll be able to take. So when you are working to register as a new volunteer, you will be assigned a learning management system or an Embark ID. You shouldn't need it to be able to submit the form. If you do and you don't have that yet, that's okay. I'm not knowing exactly what form you're referring to. Hopefully you're able to leave it blank or put in NA before you submit it, because that ID should be given to you after you register as a new volunteer. Okay. I apologize if this has been asked before, but is there an email for staff services to let them know we want to work after the storm hits? So that email, you should be getting contacted by them first, and if you aren't, then please work through your HR channels to communicate how to get in touch with them and or what your availability is. I hope that answers that question. And that is our last question. So, and we're just about at the end of the time here. Lori, anything else that you want to add?
No, I cannot express how grateful I am for everyone's support and willingness to help in this time of need. And thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. Thank you all for your time today and for being willing to volunteer to help the folks that are or will be impacted by this disaster. So thank you again, and we hope you have a great day.